Hey everybody, we're Workforce Gaming. I'm Doug, along with Brad.
Hello.
And this week we got another code from NIS America, this time for Danganronpa Another Episode Ultra Despair Girls. Now, Brad is going to be reviewing this because Brad has suddenly found a strange love for the Danganronpa series and I think visual novels in general. I think you did try another one recently and found out maybe it's not visual novels, but it might just be Danganronpa in general.
Yeah, it's definitely that because the other one I think I made it like 3 or 4 hours into it. I was like, okay, this just makes me sleepy. So I think it's just that I like Danganronpa. But anyway,
Yeah, and that was Steins Gate. That was another really big one I know that people are super
yeah,
into.
no, didn't get very far. But anyway, I do want to say before we get any further into this, if you have not finished the first Danganronpa and are concerned about spoilers at all,
Oh no. That's
this
me.
game, yeah, well, you're not gonna play it anyway. And too bad for you. But this game, just the characters in it are spoilers for the first game.
Okay. Now I'm nervous.
So just a heads up, if you have any played Danganronpa first, I haven't finished all the two. I played part of it, but I've heard there's spoilers for it, but I can't speak to that or not. So I don't know about that, but there's
Okay.
definitely spoilers for one, like big spoilers for one.
Okay. All right. Now this makes me a little nervous, but I guess we're gonna go into this. So what? Because Danganronpa Another Episode. This came out on Vita. It's
Yep.
not a visual novel, from what I understand. Is this that
No,
like third-person weird shootery
it
one where you're like
is.
schoolgirls?
Yes.
This is the sort of game I try to avoid.
See, and I would have thought that too, but again, but it's Danganronpa. So for the most part, basically what it is you're the protagonist from the first game, you're his sister. So again, spoilers for one of the things that happens in the first one is you see your family gets kidnapped.
Okay.
So basically what this is your little sister gets rescued from being kidnapped while you are in the first Danganronpa game.
Okay.
And then this is basically her trapped inside this city trying to get out is essentially the plot here.
Okay, now real quick, is this set like in the same universe as the Danganronpa? Because from what I understand, like this story goes way off the walls. Like, is it set
It
in the same universe?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
it just
all
it
right,
takes place afterwards. So the characters that survive the first game
yeah,
are basically a part of this. So your partner in all of this is Toko, who is one of the main characters from the first game.
okay,
Um and basically it was what happens a little bit after that game. So it's set in the same universe. Everything kind of follows a logical path. You can kind of pick up on what happened to these characters
yeah,
from the point that they left Hope's Peak at the end of the first one to now. So there
okay,
is it is a direct continuation of that. So there's no different universe. Now the story is all kinds of crazy and a little weird, especially in a few parts, but basically it follows a very similar path where it's broken up into 5 chapters, and at the end of every chapter, there's a boss fight and you have to beat there's essentially these 5 people who are kind of running the show in the city and trying to influence this city and create all the despair in the city. And basically the idea is it's these 5 kids who absolutely hate adults and want to kill every adult alive because adults ruin things for children.
okay. Now I've so I haven't really touched the Danganronpa series. I mean, I from what I understand, like I understand it's dark, but there is sort of like a weird like lightheartedness to it. Now is this
Yes.
now from what I understand, this one because I remember this is when I was like still like playing a lot of video games. Like you had to read every review for every video game that came out because there weren't many. I remember saying like this is not nearly as lighthearted as the other ones. Is that true or
No.
okay?
It's still fairly lighthearted, where this has a lot more very serious, very you would kind of consider them like awkward taboo conversations, just because a lot of these 5 children are given very very real reasons to hate adults.
Oh, okay, okay,
So it's not so much in the game itself, it's in when you start to get the backstory of the villains, essentially. When
gotcha.
you see like, oh, the reason I want to hate all adults is because my parents essentially locked me in a room and told me that I have to be the smartest person ever and basically refused to let me do anything but study 24 hours a day. It gets into like there's like one character who's very clearly dealing with a whole bunch of child abuse things that comes up for a second. So there's lots of weird
Cool.
things like that, which it's actually handled surprisingly well to a point where it's like, okay, like you're using this as a motivation for this character but not really being super. I mean, it gets a little weird and kind of yeah, but it's definitely a very weird way to approach a game like this, and it's definitely not
Mm,
something I was expecting going into this.
yeah. So this this all makes me so hesitant to ever touch this series. So I guess quick question, because like I know that this one is not, it's not a visual novel. Is that right? Or is this
Um,
like,
it's weird. It is a very weird hybrid between visual novel and third person action game.
oh, of course.
Um,
What?
so the action sequences almost function as a mini game to a certain extent.
Okay.
So a typical chapter in this game, I would say, is there's 5 of them. I'd say they're between 2 to 3 hours long each.
Okay.
In that chapter, you're probably doing, and a lot of it's going to depend on if you want to listen to all the voice acting go, or if you want to kind of read ahead and skip through and how fast of a reader you are.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably set up that it's about 60 to 75% cutscenes and text, and
Oh,
then
okay.
25 to whatever number I either used on the other lower end of
Yeah.
action gameplay. So for the most part, it still follows that visual novel thing. I almost feel like this would be a great thing if you're interested in visual novels to give this a try, because you get that feel of like, okay, I got to read what the characters are saying. Okay, here's a short little cutscene. Okay, read what the characters are saying. Oh, now I'm doing a little bit of action thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a weird hybrid of things, which actually is kind of cool. And I think being somebody that really liked Danganronpa, I think it's a great game to kind of look and go, okay, this is a cool way to kind of adjust this. We talked about it with Final Fantasy 15
Yeah.
episode Gladius, how it was a cool way to just take some the basics of that, a lot of the core ideas, and do it in a slightly different way. And that's what this felt like, where it's like, okay, it's still the same type of story. You're still
Yeah.
doing a lot of the visual novel things, but we're going to add in this new thing. Instead of having your little mini games here and there, we're going to give you this bigger gameplay element.
Okay. So going off the episode Gladios thing, uh, they did that different, but episode Gladios did not do it well. So I mean, like, I guess how are those action scenes? How is this compared to, like, because from what I understand, like, this is the only one that has any of these sort of action scenes. Like Danganronpa
Yes.
1, 2, and the third one sort of abandoned this entirely.
Well, yeah, this was the third one that came out. So this was like, and this is intentionally like a spin-off thing. Like this isn't supposed to be the same thing. So this is kind of
Yeah.
that like weird side thing. Um, it definitely is not great. I will tell you that. This game in my mind, if you just put this, if you put this kind of the third person action gameplay into anything else, it would not fit well. Now they do some kind of cool things with it as you go through, but the gameplay itself is not great. But again, I think that's not really the main focus here. The focus is on the story. The focus is on those visual novel elements, in my
Yeah.
mind at least. And I think, to me, looking at this, the game, deservedly so, should probably, if you're looking at it from a straight, like, I'm just going to play a third person shooter game, I like
Yeah.
Gears of War, I'm going to try this, you're going to absolutely hate every second of this. But if you go into going like, Danganronpa is really cool, I like Danganronpa, I want to hear more about these characters, I want to see more of what happens after the fact.
Yeah.
It's a very cool side story and a very cool way to do it, because I know for me, I think sitting down and just reading the whole time for some of these visual novels gets old pretty quick. So it's a really
Yeah.
cool way to kind of almost break that up, where, okay, I read for, there's 15 minutes worth of going back and forth, talking, cutscene stuff, 20
Yeah.
minutes of gameplay, kind of break it up really nicely. So yeah, but the gameplay's kind of cool. So in the mainline Danganronpa games, when you do your class trials, you get truth bullets. So this time
Mm.
you get a megaphone for some reason
Okay.
that shoots what are called truth bullets, which are different ways to hack into Monokumas. So like
Ah,
one
yes, of course.
one is like your normal bullet. There's one that knocks them down. There's one that you can hack into them and then you can control the Monokumas. There's one that makes the Monokumas dance. It's just like your like distraction one and all this kind of stuff. So you got all these different weapons and things like that. So there's some stuff to it. It's just one of those things where this is clearly a developer, because it's made by the same people, that
Yeah.
gameplay's not their specialty. And you can very easily tell that. But it's never to the point where it's frustrating or irritating. It's more of just a like, all right, I can do this for a couple minutes to get to the next part where we're getting to the story.
So I mean, I guess then on that note, I mean, you've only played through the first one, so you've played through this one. I assume you're gonna go back to the second. Do you
Yeah.
prefer that action? Like, would you have been like, oh yeah, they definitely should have kept this, or is still like clearly the best parts of these games, the visual novel, and it doesn't make sense to have these sort of action breakups?
I don't mind them. I wouldn't mind if they put them in the mainline games, but the mainline games don't work with this. It's a very different
Hmm.
style of story, because again, this is a story of these kids have captured, taken over this city with these Monokumas. The Monokumas are running everywhere. You got to try and escape. So it's a
Okay.
lot more of, you have a gun you're trying to shoot, whereas the mainline games are much more like, who did this, let's investigate, let's talk about it, let's see what we can find.
Okay.
So I don't really think there's a place for this in those games just because it's a different style story. I wouldn't mind if they figured out some way to work it in if it made sense story wise, but on a overall note, I just don't think it fits. And I think that's where this is kind of that spin-off thing. It's something different. It's a little bit of a different story because of the characters you have and the events that are taking place in the story that they're trying to tell lends itself to this. So it almost seems cool to me because it's like the developers had this idea for a story and they said, okay, what type of game could we make around that story?
Oh, I got you. That makes more sense.
So I think a lot of times when it comes to video games, we have this type of gameplay mechanic. We really like third person shooters. We're gonna try and make a third person shooter. Okay, what story can we put into the third person shooter? This very much feels like we have this story and we know where we want these characters to go. What gameplay element can we put on top of that to really get that to be emphasized into what's going on? So again, I think it all comes down to a matter of what do you like about games. And we've talked about this a couple times before where story and gameplay kind of go up and down for us as being kind of those two main factors. You talk a lot about art direction.
Yeah.
For me, story and gameplay, like that's 1 and 2.
Yeah,
1A and 1B. You know what I mean? So this one has an amazing story, great story, very, very interesting, very just kind of cool the way it plays out. And of course, there's a couple like, oh, I can see that plot twist coming type moments, especially when you get towards the end. But for the most part, great story. Gameplay's a little weak, but again, I look at it more of it's a visual novel with mini games.
So I guess on that note, do you find the story just as strong as the first game from what you played?
I like the story in the first one a little bit better. I think that this one, a lot of it comes from the fact that I liked that story so much that it's cool to kind of see some of the side characters. And you see a lot of just kind of how those characters, if you look at them when they enter Hope's Peak at the beginning to where they end at to where they are now, it's a really cool way to look at the characters that survive that and see, okay, oh, now that makes sense. Makoto, who's you, goes from being like oh, I have no clue what's really going on, this is kind of crazy, to at the end of the game you're the like unifying member and kind of the leader of this team, to where he is now, where he's like I guess that's actually almost a spoiler for this game, so
no, but
okay,
I mean,
I'd
say it's just neat that the characters progress at the very least. Like you definitely feel that progression. It doesn't feel. I mean, while it's a side story, you definitely feel like those main characters. You see the progression from the first game to this game.
Oh, for sure, yeah, which is really cool, and I like always being able to see that. So
okay, so final thoughts, I guess.
Final thoughts. This is a great game, and you should play it if you enjoyed Danganronpa. If you have not played Danganronpa, I feel like I've only messed it up twice, which isn't too bad. If you've never played it, I'd avoid it until you do. The game's it's an okay game that turns into a good game if you like Danganronpa.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So we are Workforce Gaming. If you guys like what you heard, you can always subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. See you guys next week.
Bye.